So if you've been following the news, you'll see all kinds of turmoil around political leaders. So Boris Johnson, he spoke to the leaders and he said, like, the prorogation of Parliament is the last thing that's on my mind. But actually, when he said that, he'd already written to the Queen and spoken to her, asking to prorogue Parliament. And then with the Brexit referendum, you know, that all of the parties agreed that they would honour the referendum result. But now we see everything being done to kind of undo that. And so we see on both sides that people are not honouring their word. You know, something that I was taught as a child is that the honesty is the best policy, and always the best policy. And it's something that we all find hard because we all tell lies on occasions, and the politicians are in some sense just a reflection of what we're like as people. But the sad thing is that as these people come into power, whatever side they're on, it seems that there's a race to set aside God's law, God's view of what justice is. And as that happens, we see the fabric of our society sort of coming apart. There's division on every side. Jesus said in the last days, nation would rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And we see that splitting apart kind of within Europe, the tensions in there. We see the tensions in the United Kingdom that, behind me, the Scottish Parliament, Nicola Sturgeon's so angry about the things which are happening in Westminster, saying, right, we need to take Scotland out of the United Kingdom. And on each side of these debates, Brexit and Scottish independence, it's sort of like a 50-50 split, very close to the middle. And so these are things that can bring great tension into our nation. And God has called us to be peacemakers. But when we think about a general election and who we call to be our leader, do you know that every day there's a leader who is waiting to be called on? That we can call on Jesus Christ as Lord. He's the King of Kings. He's the Lord of Lords. He's the one who rules history, who rules the nations. He has a nation among the nations, that we are called out people, called to be a holy nation, a royal priesthood, set apart for God, to live by His laws. And His laws are good laws. They're pleasing. They're sweet to the taste, and they protect our lives. And the great news we have as Christians is that we are to call people into relationship with God. When somebody comes to faith in Jesus Christ, it says if they believe in their heart that Jesus has died and risen again, and they confess with their mouth that Jesus is Lord, that's that He's God, then they will be saved. And so you don't have to wait for a general election for new leadership. The good news is that for every person, every day, they can call on Jesus Christ, and He will lead them, and He will do a better job of leading them than the people behind me or the people in Westminster. And as more and more people call on Jesus, it will change the nation. It will help the nation. It will save the nation. It will change the nation. It will bring justice to those who are in need. It will change the lives of those who are in poverty. It will break people out of addiction. It will solve the issues to do with drugs and crime and violent crime and anger stored up in people's hearts. And so there's never been a better time to call on the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. And when we do that, it's not us electing Him. The funny thing is that it's Him electing us. He calls His people the elect, and He's called us to, in a sense, be leaders when it comes to dignity, honesty, truth. It says that Jesus rides out for truth, for justice, for humility, and He wants to do that in us. He wants us to be conformed to His likeness, and He calls us to then go and make disciples who will obey His word. You can make whatever laws you want in Parliament, but people in their hearts are going to decide whether they obey them, whether they evade the taxes that the government sets in place, or whether they abide by them, whether they keep the laws that the government gives, or whether they set them aside. And the great thing about Jesus is that he gives us his Spirit, and that means that as we're tempted to break God's commandments, he brings us a warning, and we can pray and we can say, God, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one, and that helps us to live in God's way.